Hello, everybody. It's me, Shannon LaBruyere. I am live and loving it. It is Sunday, October 20th, 2019, and I am thrilled to be here to help you learn to thrive in change. I want you to thrive in the change you want, the change you invite, and also in the change that you didn't want that hit you upside the head, right? So change, it's all about how we approach it. It's gonna happen no matter what. Margaret, I'm glad you jumped in. First one in the pool, I love it. Paul, thank you. Thank you for being here. It is great to have you. I am excited to talk tonight about something that my husband and I were talking about. Yesterday actually, we took a nice weekend trip to Traverse City. It was lovely. Had a wonderful time. The colors are changing. It's fall in Michigan. It's just so good. And we started talking a little bit about ratchets and how the ratcheting effect can totally change the entire dynamic of a team, and it can totally change the trajectory of our lives. So I'm so glad. Oh, Sherry, I'm glad you're here. Thanks for jumping on. And I love those hearts. When you guys hit those hearts, it touches my heart. It really does. So thank you. Thank you for being engaged. If you've got comments, I invite you to put them in. I love to see them, and so do the other folks that are part of the Sunday Night Live group. We really love to see what you have to say, and it gives us food for thought. It gives me food for thought. If there's something in particular that you'd like me to talk about, drop it in there. I'd love to be able to do it. So thank you so much for being here. Now we're going to get started. We're going to talk about ratchets. All right, so you might have seen the picture that I posted to kind of publicize this Sunday Night Live. It was a picture of these straps on a fence and some levers. And I don't know, maybe you've gone on vacation and used a car topper that you put on top of your luggage rack. Hey, Samantha, so glad to see you. And Samuel, I'm so glad you're here. And Samuel, I have a feeling that Stella might be on too. So if she is, hello, Stella. Samuel's coming to us from Uganda, so that's pretty awesome. Thank you. All right, so the picture on Facebook I had, it was these straps that when you hit this buckle, it makes the straps tighten down. And a lot of times we use them on the top of our cars when we've got a luggage rack up there in a car carrier. And we've got to have a nice sturdy strap. Then we crank it down. You know what I'm talking about. And every time it's a little bit tighter. That's an example of a ratchet. When we move the handle down, it tightens it. And when we turn the handle up, nothing happens. It's because a ratchet only wants to move in one direction. So a ratchet, clamping things down, moving things in one direction, down, tighter. So we've used those before. I've seen ratcheting wrenches and of course those ratcheting straps. It progressively tightens every time we push the lever. And we often have ratcheting situations in our lives. We often have situations in our life that every time something happens in that situation, it gets worse. Have you ever had anything like that? I'm remembering a time, this was about 20 years ago, and it was Easter, and we had made Easter baskets for our children, and as was my habit, my husband and I put together these Easter baskets, and there was one for each of the children. There was one for him, and then I got to keep all the leftovers. And I happened to start eating jelly beans. So Easter came, I was eating jelly beans, and they were so delicious that I thought I wanted a few more. And then I wanted a few more. And then I discovered, without really noticing it, that I was craving jelly beans. So I went and I bought a few bags of them at the drugstore. They were 75% off. That's awesome. Hey, Stacy, I'm glad you're here. Right? I started eating these jelly beans, which then made me want more jelly beans, which made me want more jelly beans. And then pretty soon, the ratchet of my diet was clamping down. And all I wanted was jelly beans. Now, one day I was driving home from work and I tried to go up the exit ramp of an expressway. I was trying to enter the expressway on the wrong ramp. This was a ramp, my friends, that I had been on at least, I'm not exaggerating, 500 times. I knew it was the exit ramp, and that scared me. It scared me that I had done something that could have killed me or someone else. So I went to the doctor and I said, I'm going crazy. I don't know what's happening to me, but I'm not thinking clearly. I'm going up the wrong ramp on the expressway. I drove 2 miles the other day and was in the left-hand turn lane, and I don't know how I got there, and I'm afraid that something's really, really wrong. And what they discovered was my jelly bean habit had been affecting my blood sugar. Some of you know what I'm talking about, right? My jelly bean habit caused my sugar to spike, which caused my insulin to spike, which made my blood sugar drop, which made me crave more jelly beans, which caused my insulin to spike, which made me drop my blood sugar. And pretty soon, all I was eating was jelly beans and all my body was getting was sugar. And it turns out, my friends, that your brain does not function well when all it is eating or being fueled by is jelly beans. I know that sounds funny, but it was tragic. It was a ratchet of my health. A lot of us have encountered that ratchet of our health where we don't have time to make good food for ourselves, right? So we eat some junk, and then that junk makes us more tired, so we don't get good rest because we haven't been eating good fuel, and we're too tired to do anything about it, so we can't exercise, and pretty soon the ratchet of our health goes right down. It spirals. That's a ratchet. So ratchets show up in our health all the time, but they also can show up in our work. And let me see, it was Sherry who just commented and said that her day job is kind of that ratchet of things keep getting worse and getting worse and getting worse. Yeah, I know the feeling. I've been there. I've seen it happen. For example, in part of my job as a coach, I was coaching a work team that was not effective, that was had very low productivity. And one of the things I did was I sat in on their staff meetings to see, how did this team interact? How did they work together? And so we had just nice chit chat at the beginning of the staff meeting, and it turned out the topic of this meeting in particular was attendance. So if you have a company that has employees that report to work, you will probably be shocked to find out that this company, this team actually, had about a 13% call-in rate from their whole workforce. 13% of their, if they had 100 employees, 13 of them were calling in sick. And these were 13 employees that they needed. They had terrible trouble with their attendance. And they were talking about, boy, why they couldn't get a handle on it. They just didn't have time to have interviews with employees and talk with them when they were absent. And they didn't have time to be creative about how to engage employees so that they wanted to come to work. I'm telling you, this conversation, they were pretty adamant that they could not do anything about the attendance. It was just bad, and it was continuing to spiral and get worse. So they got done complaining about attendance. Hey, Michael, I'm glad you're here. They got done complaining about the attendance, and they moved on to the next agenda item, which was, well, folks, it's the 0 hour, and we've got to turn in a list of the seasonal people that we want to rehire to work with us for the next 6 months. And the whole table, everybody just looked around with a blank stare. Because for 3 weeks, Human Resources had been asking this team, now we're talking about a ratchet here, for weeks, Human Resources had been asking this team, tell us which employees you want to invite back to work for the rest of the year. And then the rest of them we're going to release because we don't need them anymore. We don't have the volume that requires that many employees. So they had 3 weeks to figure out who did they want to bring back. Instead, nobody thought about it until the 0 hour. And this is what their boss said. All right, so I've got to turn in a list of names, and I've got to turn it in by 2 o'clock today. So we need to come up with 5 people that we want to bring back. And so they started doing a little chit chat and then figured out, okay, we're going to invite back John. We're going to invite back Sue. We're going to invite back Carol. We'll have, Max come back. They came up with this random list of employees. Just, it seemed random. And so I inserted myself as a coach. I said, okay, hold on a second. Let's back up. Why are you selecting those employees? I'm not making this up. The reason they submitted that they had picked those 5 names was because they actually knew the first and last names of those people. All of the rest of the other 20 or 30 seasonal employees that they had hired, nobody actually knew their first and last name. So I'm going to give you a second to think about, why do you think they knew the first and last name of those 5 employees? I'll tell you why. It was because they were constantly in trouble. So Joe was constantly disappearing. So the supervisor would have to get onto the overhead speaker and say, Joe Smith, please report back to the dock. Joe Smith, report to the dock. Joe Smith, programmed right up here. Can you see how a ratchet is starting? Mary Jones, please report to your workstation. Joe Blow, I'm going to have to get on you because you've called in sick 3 times this week. And they had to write his name down on the paperwork. The supervisors only knew the first and last name of the temporary employees who were terrible. And yet, you can see the ratchet starting here. And yet, because they were under pressure, because they had run out of time, those were the names that made it on the list, because they didn't even have time to go investigate to find out, what is the first and last name of that guy who wears the black jacket, who's always doing what I tell him to and I never have to look for him. That's how ratchets work. And so what they had been doing up until I intervened, what they had been doing was taking the first names that came to mind so they could submit them to HR and get that task checked off and done. And then when those employees came back and they were stuck with them for the rest of the year, productivity was down, performance was down, attendance was worse, and the ratchet clicked down. How about this one? A single mom. She doesn't have a car. She lives in an area that doesn't have public transportation. Maybe she's a little bit out in the country. Maybe she's like in the Detroit metro area and we don't have great public transportation. A single mom doesn't have a car. She catches a ride to work with a friend who works there too. And she doesn't have any way to get to the grocery store. She doesn't have a car. So what does she do? On the way home, as she's riding with that friend, so that she doesn't put the friend out, when the friend stops to get gas, that mom runs into the convenience store and she buys a bag of cereal, a box of cereal. It's half the size of what she'd get at the grocery store. It costs twice as much. And she pays for it out of her tips. And the ratchet clicks down because she's buying expensive cereal in low quantities every day, a little bit at a time, because that's all she can do. And it means that she doesn't have any extra money to save for a car. It's the ratchet of poverty. There are ratchets all around us. They happen in our health. They happen in our relationships. They happen with our sleep. Have you ever stayed up too late? You couldn't get any sleep. You stayed up too late. You watched some TV. You read a book. You just couldn't sleep. So then when you finally fell asleep, you overslept. And then you slept so long that night when it was time to go to bed at the regular time, you couldn't go to sleep. So you stayed up even later, you slept in even later, and pretty soon it's all wonky. That's the ratchet at work. Dawn, I'm glad you're here, and it is A-okay if you were late. I don't mind a bit. I'm just glad you jumped in. And Jim, I'm glad you're here watching as well. Thank you for joining us. We're talking about the ratcheting effect. It can happen anywhere in our lives, in our health, in our sleep. It happens at work. It happens in our communities. This is the thing. Ratchets are designed to only work in one direction. Every time you hit that handle down, the strap gets a little tighter. And when you lift it up, nothing happens. The only way to interrupt that is to intervene. It takes an intervention. On one of those snaps, there's a little lever you push. Click. And it pops open, right? And now it's loose. You can take those straps off. If you've ever taken the car carrier off the top of your van, right? You know, you hit that little button and whew, that strap comes right off. If you want to be a hero at work, interrupt a ratchet. Interrupt a ratchet that is clamping down on people, that is making, every time they make that decision, it makes the next decision worse. For example, we were talking about that team that was so worried about attendance, and the ratchet kept coming down because they didn't have employees reporting to work. They didn't have enough time to do their jobs because they were frantic and scrambling, and then they had to make compromises that meant that the next day they were going to have worse attendance because people, and on it goes. What if you, as a stand person, somebody standing by, somebody who maybe wants to be noticed, somebody who wants to get promoted, somebody who wants to make a difference, what if you were to say, hey, would it help you if I pulled a list of all the first and last names of all of our seasonal employees? And then you can take it to the staff meeting? You intervene, you interrupt, you release that ratchet. Everything would have been different in that team meeting if the lead manager had a list in front of her, but she didn't even have time to get the list. This is a secret for you. If you want to be promoted at work, find a ratchet and interrupt it. And if you want to become a superstar, create a system that instead of that ratchet clamping down and making things worse, we have less and less time, we have less and less resources, we have less and less patience. Instead of having a process that ratchets down, what if you created a process that ratcheted up, that the more you did it, the better it got? What if, for example, with that team, what if you created a process where every employee, every supervisor got to personally meet first and last names the employees that were seasonal employees? Maybe it's at the beginning when they come on. Maybe you offer to say, hey, let's have a little meeting. Let's make it 15 minutes. Let's get some bagels and let's all introduce ourselves to these new employees. Let's make sure everybody has the name tag that has their first and last name on it that we can see, right? It doesn't have to be major, but something that takes that and makes it better instead of worse is how you get promoted. It's how you make a difference. It's how you have impact. And if you're in a career, that's everything. Find a ratchet, interrupt it, and you are going to get promoted. I have a hint for you. If you want to find a place where a ratchet is happening in a workplace, look for the areas where the important things have been put off so long that they become urgent. If you can find that, where the important thing of keeping track of employees and what their attendance was, if you can find that simple thing that didn't happen until it became an emergency and you interrupt it, you're a hero. I don't know what kind of a work situation you're in. I don't know who your boss is. I don't know if you work in a processing plant or if you work in a restaurant. I don't know where you work, but I can tell you this. There are areas, if you are in tune with them, where you can see that that ratchet is making it more and more difficult for people, for employees, for supervisors to be successful. Cassie, I'm glad you're here. Hello. Jill, I'm glad you jumped on. Thank you for being here. We were talking about that ratchet effect, that effect where everything that you do tightens it down and makes it worse, and there's no way to go in reverse without interrupting it. Interrupting it is the key. If you can become somebody who can interrupt a ratchet, you will be a hero. You will be a hero. If we want to have impact in our world, we can also look for ratchets. Think about that single mom. Yeah, I love those hearts. Thank you. I'm glad you're feeling me. Think about that single mom who doesn't have a car. She doesn't have a car. And because she doesn't have a car, she has to pay somebody else to take her to work. That's money that she could be saving for a car, but she can't. And then she has to ask for a favor. Can I run into the convenience store to buy that expensive bag of cereal because I know my kids don't have any? And so she goes and pays twice as much to get half as much, and then there's no money to put away. How could you interrupt that? How could you make a difference in somebody's life, either personally or through an organization, that interrupted that ratchet of poverty, that allows somebody to get that breathing room? The release happens, and now they get to save their money instead of spend more. What if you came up with a way to take single moms to the grocery store so that they could spend their money at the inexpensive store, right? That interrupts the ratchet. You know what's even better? When I think about the cycle of poverty and the ratchet that it puts on people who are just can't get a foot up, they just can't get a leg up. I love this idea of the farmers markets, and they do this here in Michigan. I'm not sure if they do that in your state or your country, but in the farmers markets in Michigan, when somebody who's on food assistance, who has children, who has food assistance from the state so that they can make ends meet and feed their family, when they take it to a farmers market where there's healthy food at usually pretty cheap prices, they get double the bang for their buck. Their money goes twice as far because our assistance program doubles it for them. They say if you were going to spend $1 at the grocery store, that dollar, you can make it $2 if you spend it at the farmer's market. That's a system that's ratcheting up, right? That's a system that says, ooh, now we've got people who not only are able to stretch their food dollar, but they're able to stretch it in a way that's going to add to their overall health. When they're in better health, that costs them less in doctor's visits, it costs them less in missed time at work, and the ratchet is going in the right direction. The ratchet effect is so powerful. If you see a ratchet that's tightening somebody down that you know, how could you interrupt it? How could you make it different? How could you make it better? We've heard the stories of single parents who have to spend so much on childcare that they can't even make enough money to pay for it. What could you do? What could you do to interrupt that ratchet so that instead of it costing every dime of their paycheck to get childcare, they can get a leg up. They can have a little bit of extra. They can set something aside. We all have the ability to intervene and interrupt a ratchet, whether we're doing it at work and we're helping our team, we're helping our company. Maybe it's our company, and maybe we've created a ratchet because we don't do planning. Lack of planning is a ratchet. Teddy's glad that his daddy is home. Lack of planning is a ratchet. It's a ratchet that will keep clamping down until it gets you so locked up that you have nowhere to go. Setting our priorities, making plans, that's a ratchet that works up, that allows us to expand our impact, expand our influence, give ourselves breathing room, right? Taking those things that are in the urgent category and moving them back into the important. Do them as we can, make sure they're a priority. Moving the urgent things into the important category is creating a positive ratchet. When we are taking things from the important category and putting them off so long that they become urgent, we've created a negative ratchet. So, Dawn, I am glad you're here. And let me see, who else am I missing? Oh, I can't make it. Oh, there we go. Let me see. Brandy's here. Yay! And Jeffrey Taylor, I'm glad you stopped by. Cassie, I saw you. Oh, Pam, yay! Stacy, yeah, no kidding. That was crazy, Stacy. Yeah, but it happens all over the place. It happens all over the place. When people feel like they don't have enough time to make the good decision, they just make the convenient decision, and the ratchet turns down. Jim Von Allman, I'm glad you're here. So glad to see you. Oh, Lynn Faselli, please call me tomorrow about speaking for WBOA if you're interested. Heck yeah, I'm interested, Lynn. Yes, I would love to. Woohoo! Thank you. Gosh, you guys, this is fun. Let's see who else. Shay, I'm glad you're here. Brian, thank you for popping in. Let me see. I might have missed some, but we're wrapping up, you guys. Crystal, glad you're here. Will, I'm glad you're here. What do you guys think about the ratchet? Where is there a negative ratchet in your business, in your home, in your heart? Look for those. Look for the ratchets and intervene. Intervene. At least stop it. And then look for a way to create a positive ratchet that makes things go up in direction instead of down. And I am glad you're here. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much for joining. I'm honored, truly honored, and I can't wait to talk to you next time. Mwah! Bye.